And if I ask you, every one of you, you will have a completely different view of what the paradigm of EGOC is. So we have this common experience, and yet there is something which is called EGOC, which is the batatoid, as we say in French, the circle around all of the paper distributed. This is not your field, this is the field of complex systems, but it doesn't matter, because you see nothing anyway. What is interesting is the dispersion. We are perfectly happy to be in a field which is a field which has a circle around it, where absolutely no element is actually similar. We are not in a structure. We are overlapping monads. You see the point? And it's very clear. I think if we had done this little, I should actually have done if I had all the abstract and bring the same type of map. We do that at the Media Lab. It's really a cinch. And for your field, I mean for your papers here, you will not have, maybe you will have a few papers here, actually there are a few papers in the middle, but they are not what inside which all the other papers are. They are just some of the overlap of the paper. So you see the experience we had as scientists of a paradigm is a very good metaphor from what I mean by monads, superposing monads. I agree, the visualization is terrible. But the experience we have, that's what we have to retrieve if you want to understand what is an organization without using the individual versus institution divide. And it's a common experience. The question is, and that's a very practical question of visualization, can we actually manage this overlapping, which is a very different project, and that's why our friends who co-wrote the paper were a bit worried, because we were coming from physics, and they were expecting a modelization, a simulation even, where you start with atomic, you have rules of interaction, and you obtain something like the shading model for paradigm. And we said, no, we are not interested in that anymore. We don't want to squeeze out all the information we have on these individual papers and individual scientists in order to obtain what was very, very trivial rule of interacting that would be called the structure of a field of complex systems. We want to keep the complex information we have and see if instead of trying to model it, we pass slowly from this unreadable map to, well, barely more readable map. That is where the transformation is not from atomistic entities interacting with simple rules of interaction to obtain a structure, but overlapping monads, confusing at first, and the search assemble them, reassemble them, to use the title of your symposium, in a way which is readable. So it's a very different task, but it's a task where instead of losing the information or qualitative information you have at the beginning, the aim is not to lose it. The aim is to go from a very confusing image of superposed image, monads, to something which begin to look like entities, which are not individual entities, and which are not collective entities. They are overlapping, clarified overlapping, if you want to use these words, which I agree is not an excellent word. Okay, well, that's basically what I had to say. I agree, I wanted to disappoint you a little bit on the end. Because that's where we need to work. That's where it becomes very interesting to open, and of course the digital techniques and the interface is very useful for that, ways of visualizing organization. And I insist that visualizing organization is not a trivial task if we want to now sort of, what was the word we used yesterday? I think you said to bring, the organization field is very good at using other paradigm, but not so good at bringing them to the masses. Bringing them to the masses, I mean, this is what you do in churches, right? Go and bring them to the masses. Well, if we want to do that, we need to be able to get out of a macro divide. And we need to be able to get out of a qualitative, quantitative distinction. And I think the monad would help. And that's what, basically, and I will skip these things because I've already, well, and that's another unreadable images anyway. So that's basically what, and this is an article submitted to the British Journal of of sociology with friend Pablo Jensen, Dominique Boulier, who is another sociologist and a biologist. Because of course it's a question which interests biologists even more than specialists of organization. The question of what is a body is a key question for people in biology, who knows that there is no central planning in a body. And they know it's not atomistic either. And they know that every cell in our body has all the information of all the other cells. So when they hear monad, they say, we know what it is. That's a big point for us. And I said, yes, it's a big point for us too, dealing with humans. Can we share some of our data points, and some of data sets, and some of our empirical questions? And that, I think, is the way, for me, to propose you today, to reassembling organization. Because as long as we are stuck in this micro, macro, or qualitative, quantitative, we can't even speak to these guys. It's very difficult to address them. They always reject that on the side of qualitative description. But now, the tool we have at our disposal allows qualitative description to be actually visually equivalent to quantitative numbers. And I think that's an experience we should not lose, and that's one way of getting into the connection, so to speak, with the other disciplines. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we have no time for questions. Well, I got it.
Thank you very much. Now, lunch will be served in the H building and in the S building. In S building in D